If there is one thing that I absolutely love and that fascinates me beyond belief almost more so than anything else, it would have to be scrapped Pokemon designs and other cut Pokemon content. If you have followed the channel for very long, then you probably know about this, since I have extensively covered various forms of cut Pokemon content, everywhere from cut Pokemon themselves, to cut mechanics from the games, cut areas in the games themselves, and so on. But one thing that I really haven't covered in too much detail, at least in a dedicated video, would be the cut human characters that we have learned about over the years from the various Pokemon games. Obviously, in a series about magical creatures that you catch and collect, the human characters are definitely going to get overshadowed just a little bit, but nevertheless they are obviously very interesting and definitely have a lot to offer themselves, and just like the cut Pokemon that we have learned about recently, there are also a bunch of human characters in various Pokemon games that were cut for one reason or another, and that is exactly what we're going to highlight in today's video, going over and discussing every single human character that we know of that has been cut from the main series Pokemon games. Quick disclaimer before we get into it though, because even though I did research this pretty extensively to ensure that I got every human character that has been cut from Pokemon games that we currently know of, obviously this is a lot of information to go over, and it's very possible that I could have just missed something that was hiding in the nooks and crannies of the internet. So if that does indeed end up being the case, I'm sorry, I'm only human, and I definitely did the best I could. But with all of that out of the way, I'm pretty sure I got everyone here, so let's go ahead and take a look at some cut human characters from the Pokemon games. Okay, so we are going to go in generational order here, and starting off with Generation 1, we have none other than Green. Now, even though Green, who has largely been a manga-exclusive character to this point, finally made her video game debut in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee in 2018, it is very possible that she was under consideration for inclusion in the original Pokemon Red and Green before she was cut. This is because, amongst other evidence, she directly appears on the official strategy guide for the games, despite not appearing in the games at all. The Generation 1 games were very haphazard in terms of what they did and didn't include, and sometimes stuff that got cut from the final games still found a way to make it into the public eye in official material, like we see here. And even though she eventually did find her way into the games officially with Let's Go, with her being such an interesting and spunky kind of character, it was definitely a shame prior to Let's Go's release that she had been cut from consideration for so long. The rest of the cut characters from Generation 1 that we're going to talk about today come from information that was obtained from the Pokemon Red and Green beta in February of 2019. There were several very interesting cut characters from the days of Generation 1 that we had no idea about prior to their information being revealed in this aforementioned Red and Green beta. And courtesy of Helix Chamber, who has cataloged all of this information for us on their website, we have first and foremost the Sylph Chief. Now, the Sylph Chief, whose given sprite on the Helix Chamber website looks very reminiscent of Blaine's final sprite from the Generation 1 games, seems to be the head boss of Silphco, who we actually see in the final games but don't actually interact with, and he doesn't even really get a formal title as we see here in the beta. Based on his sprite though, it definitely does seem like he was meant to be battled at one point in time, or at the very least have some kind of Pokemon team. He definitely looks kind of menacing as well, which could even suggest that he was going to be an antagonist-like character at one point in time before he was cut. We'll most likely never know more for sure, or at least not for a long while, but even just his presence within the game shows that originally the direction of the Generation 1 titles was vastly different to what it ended up like in the final product. Speaking of characters that reveal a different direction for the Generation 1 games, this next character we're going to highlight here goes by the name of Shinjuku Jack. Now, Shinjuku Jack is a very interesting looking character because it actually looks like he's a robot. Given his sprite itself, it also seems like he was meant to be battled, which makes this whole thing even more interesting, and there's even a Pokemon within the Red and Green beta that was also cut that seems like it could have been his signature Pokemon, as it resembles a robot dragon and/or dinosaur. I honestly have no idea how he would have been worked into the plot in any way, shape, or form, but it obviously would have been interesting to say the least. Next up, we have one of the more well-known cut characters from Generation 1, and that would be the original first gym leader, who in the red and green beta is specified to be known as Yujiro. This guy was originally seen in some Ken Sugimori concept sketches where he was shown to be the original first gym leader in the Kanto lineup instead of Brock, who was subsequently marked as second in the lineup and so on and so forth for the rest of the gym leaders. This possibly explains why the first gym you actually come across in the Kanto games is in Viridian City, even though you don't actually challenge it, because originally it was probably going to be this guy's gym before that gym was moved to be the 8th gym in the lineup, and Brock's gym was moved to be the first. In the red and green beta, he even has 2 different sprites which show his design evolution, so he definitely went through some thought and some change before he was ultimately cut altogether by the time the final games came out. There's even a character in the red and green beta that was cut from the games who Helix Chamber speculates was supposed to be Blue's little brother. Based on his sprite, he definitely does look like a little kid version of a Pokemon player character or protagonist, and according to Helix Chamber, they suspect that this is the case due to the fact that his name possibly references a Japanese ranking system where Ume, the first part of his name, is the lowest ranking. And according to them, Blue was also known as Take at an earlier point in development, which is also the middle ranking of this tier system, which would subsequently make Professor Oak the highest ranking in the tier system, which would then connect all of these characters together and prove that this little guy was indeed Blue's little brother. It would have been really interesting to see how a character like this would have played out in the final plot of the games, but obviously it wasn't meant to be. We also have a rather hardcore looking character that even has an eye patch, and this guy was actually none other than the original gym coach that is present in every single gym that cheers you on as the champion in the making. This guy's name is Danpei, who is based on a character of the same name from the Ashita no Jo manga, and even though he was cut from the very first games in the series, before the franchise even got off the ground, his name actually survives within the data of the games all the way up until at least Pokemon X and Y, which shows that even though he didn't get to see the spotlight as an official character, he certainly wasn't forgotten by the staff over at Game Freak. And finally, the last character we're going to cover from Generation 1 is actually none other than your dad. Even though his sprite is not available in the Pokemon Red and Green beta, according to Helix Chamber, there is data within the beta that does suggest that in fact, you were originally going to have a father character in the original Pokemon games. Nothing more is known about this character, but maybe his removal from the very first Pokemon games prompted the trend that we now see in most Pokemon games even to this day, where the player character's father is noticeably absent. Moving into Generation 2, we now move into information that was provided to us by the Gold and Silver Beta demo leak from a couple years ago, and the very first character that we're going to highlight from this original build of the Gen 2 games is Imposter Oak. This character, complete with his own set of sprites, was originally going to be in the Gold and Silver games as an impersonator of Professor Oak, likely trying to make him out to be some kind of villain or criminal. No other information about him is known aside from this, but it's obviously safe to say that he would have made the story of Pokemon Gold and Silver very, very interesting. Another interesting cut Gen 2 character is actually who appears to be one of Silver's family members. Now, in the final games, Silver doesn't actually have a house that you can go to meet any of his potential family, but in the beta of Gold and Silver, you can actually go to his house, and in his house is who appears to be either his mother or his sister. She is given a simple generic NPC sprite and is not given any kind of name to identify her, but obviously given the fact that she is in Silver's house, that does most likely mean that we are looking at either Silver's mother or sister. A character that wasn't cut completely from the games but was cut from Pokemon Gold and Silver is actually Agatha, because originally, as of the Gold and Silver beta demo, Agatha was planned to appear in the Generation 2 games. games. She seems to have been planned for a lesser role in these games because even though she does appear at the time of the Gold and Silver beta demo where she is present, she is not actually amongst the Elite Four where she originally was in Pokemon Red and Blue, as the Elite Four at this time consisted of Giovanni, Misty, Bruno, and Lorelei, who is also another character who was cut from the Gen 2 game. Yes, indeed, the Ice-type user Lorelei was originally going to maintain her position as a member of the Elite Four in Gold and Silver before ultimately she was cut and replaced with Karen. This decision was likely made due to the fact that the developers probably wanted to include a Dark-type specialist at some point in the game due to the fact that the Dark-type was being newly introduced in these titles. So earlier in the video, I talked about a character that was cut from Pokemon Red and Blue that was originally likely going to be Blue's little brother, and in Generation 2 we actually have another brother that was also cut as well, and that would be the player character's older brother, Ken. Now, there is no sprite of Ken within the beta of Gold and Silver, at least as far as I could find, but there are some text strings within it that prove that not only was he present, but he was also in fact the player character's brother. Interestingly, he also shares a name with the famous and legendary art director for Game Freak and the Pokemon games, Ken Sugimori, which is where his name likely originates. Moving away now from the Gold and Silver beta demo to some other sources that have revealed cut characters from Gen 2, we have both a male and female trainer that graced the cover of a Japanese magazine around the time that Gold and Silver were released. Granted, these were drawn by Ken Sugimori, and it was stated by him that he drew them as original characters for the magazine's cover, so they weren't specifically Pokemon characters at the time, but as we can see, basically every other character on the cover was converted into an official Pokemon character and/or Pokemon, meaning that these two were likely considered for inclusion into the franchise as well, but fell just a bit short. Back into the category of characters not cut completely from the franchise, but cut from a specific game, we have Chris being cut from Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Despite appearing in Pokemon Crystal and being the first female player character in Pokemon ever, she was replaced with Lyra in the Heart Gold and Soul Silver remakes, despite evidence suggesting within the data of the games that she was originally going to be included. It seems like such an odd choice to make, especially considering everything else from Pokemon Crystal are in the games as well, but we currently have no idea as to why this actually happened. And speaking of Chris, in the original Gen 2 games, there was actually another female player character that was considered before Chris was even a thing. In some early pre-release screenshots that are admittedly very low resolution, we can see images of a female player character that is definitely not Chris. You can't really tell much else to be honest, but you can definitely tell that it's not Chris, which is extremely interesting regardless. Moving on to Gen 3, there is only one cut character here as far as I'm aware of that we know about, and that would be the Lotican trainer. During the beta stages of Ruby and Sapphire, a concept sketch was produced of a Pokemon that is essentially the combination of a Latias and Blaziken, and writing this Pokemon is a character that never made it into the final games. She also heavily resembles another character that appears in official artwork, but she remained unnamed here as well and never made it into the final games. Whatever her purpose was, she was likely very important as she is literally seen riding a legendary Pokemon in both pieces of art. And finally, the last character I have to cover today comes out of Gen 5, and that would be the original form of Professor Juniper, who was actually supposed to be a fat guy. According to an interview with Ken Sugimori and translated by Dr. Lava, Juniper was supposed to be fat along with Cedric Juniper, who was supposed to be old. Sugimori argued that the professor should be a woman instead, however, and as such he got his wish and Professor Juniper was born, and Cedric's design was reworked so he could actually be Juniper's father. Sugimori also says that this was the case up until about halfway through development on Pokemon Black and White, which is a rather late change for such an important character. I definitely would like to see what their original vision looked like for this first Unova professor, but I certainly enjoy Professor Juniper as well. Thank you all so much for watching this video. As I said earlier, I did my best to make sure that I included every character possible that we know about in this video, but obviously it's possible that I could miss someone, so if I did, don't be too angry at me and just let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know about all of these other characters I did mention in the video, and let me know which ones you would have liked to have seen actually be included in the game. Also, be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it because it really helps out, and be sure to subscribe if you're new for new Pokemon content all the time. You can also support the channel further if you would like by checking me out on Spotify and listening to my Pokemon remixes, and checking out my Pokemon Cardinal project if you haven't yet. With all of that being said though, I will be back on Thursday with another video, so be sure to hit that notification bell so you can be notified just as soon as it goes live. And with all of that being said, I hope you know I love you guys very much. I hope you're having a great day, and until the next one, as always, I will smell you guys later.